Welcome to PVHC TV. I'm Sophia and this is Obi. Today we're going to learn how to put on a Western saddle. The first step in putting on our Western saddle is putting on our Western pad. The Western pad goes on your horse's back, lined up with their spine. You want it to be centered on their back, but not so far back that it's touching their flank right here. So I'm going to pull the pad forward to cover the withers right here. Now we're going to go over the two safest ways to carry your saddle so that you don't hurt your back. The first one is carrying it close to your body with the horn tucked under your armpit like this, up higher than your waist so that your back is straight and your saddle's weight is against your weight. That way you can walk freely without it hurting your back. The second way is by taking the front of your saddle and putting it on your hip like this and using your arm to hold the saddle like this with the horn close to your armpit. Next, we're going to put the saddle on. First, I'm going to make sure that I'm facing the right direction. I want to be standing on his left and the horn goes in the front. Next, I'm going to swing the saddle over his back and making sure that there's no straps or stirrups underneath it when I set it down. You want your saddle to line up with the center of your pad and the center of your horse. Next, I'm going to make sure that it's lined up all the way around and that there's nothing tucked underneath the saddle on either side. I'm also going to make sure that the saddle is sitting in the center of my pad and not too far back on his back or too far up on his neck. Next, I'm going to put on the cinch. The cinch attaches here to the off billet. I'm going to slide the off billet through the buckles of the cinch. And then I'm going to tuck the end of the off billet into the strap keeper on the cinch. Then I'm going to make sure that the cinch lines up with his body and is not tucked under the pad or folded over on itself like that. To make sure that the cinch is centered, I lay it down under his stomach and I see that these loops are in between his front legs. Now that the cinch is attached on the right side, I've come around to the left side to attach it here. First, I'm going to put my stirrup up on the horn of my saddle so that it's out of my way when I'm attaching my cinch. Next, I'm going to reach underneath my horse's stomach and grab the cinch, making sure that it sits comfortably behind his front legs, not too far forward where it would pinch him and not too far back. Once the cinch is pulled underneath his stomach, I'm going to take this piece called the latigo and thread it through the other buckle on the cinch. I want to make sure that there's no twists or turns in the latigo and that it's laying flat against my horse. And like on the other side, I want to make sure that nothing is folded under like that because that could hurt or pinch my horse. Once I have the latigo, I'm going to continue to loop it through its own buckle a few times. Once I have it with about this much of the latigo left, I'm going to tie off my cinch. I take the end of the latigo and tuck it through this loop like I did before, but instead of going down, I'm going to go out to the side, across the cinch, through the loop again, so that I have a nice loop right here, and then I'm going to take the end of the latigo, pull it straight through, and tighten it. Once my cinch is attached, I'm going to double check all the parts of my saddle to make sure that I'm ready to ride. First, I'm going to double check that my cinch is tight enough. If I can fit my whole fist into my cinch, it's too loose. So I'm going to tighten it by pulling up on this outside-most strap. I'm just going to pull up and each piece of the latigo will slide through the buckles. Then I'm going to thread it through the knot that I created, finishing by pulling the end down tightly. And now you can see my hand doesn't fit underneath the cinch anymore and I'm ready to go. Next, I'm going to take the stirrup down off of my saddle. And I'm going to stick my hand underneath the front of the saddle to make sure it's not pushing down on his withers too much. Then I'm just going to walk around and make sure that the saddle is centered on his back still, and that there's nothing tucked underneath and there's no straps loose. Everything looks good, so I'm ready to ride. Now that my saddle is on, I'm going to put on my hackamore. The first step in putting on my hackamore is taking my lead rope and laying it over my horse's neck, like so. That way, if he walked away when his halter is off, I can still hold on to him. Next, I'm going to take the reins of my hackamore that's this part, and put them around his head and over his neck like I'm using them to ride with. Now that I have two things over my horse's neck, I can take his halter off by untying this knot. I'm going to let it fall down over his nose, and then I'm going to tie it around his neck like this. Now I'm going to take the hackamore, and I'm going to put it in my right hand on the other side of his head. You can see I'm holding it here. Next, I'm going to use my left hand to hold the bit that goes underneath his chin and put the hackamore on top of his nose. Next, I'm going to fold his ears one at a time under the top of the bridle. Now that it's on his head, I'm going to look at it from the front and make sure that every piece of it is even and that nothing is crooked. Next, I'm going to buckle the throat latch, this strap underneath my horse's throat. With the throat latch, you want to make sure that it's loose enough that you can fit 4 fingers underneath their throat like this. When I can fit 4 fingers underneath, I buckle it and I stick the end through the keeper. Now that my hackamore is on, I can untie my halter and remove it from his neck. Now, my horse is ready to go. Now we're going to learn how to take our hackamore off of our horse. It's the same steps, but in reverse. So first, I'm going to put my lead rope over my horse's neck. And see, I have my reins already over my horse's neck as well. Then, I'm going to undo the throat latch here and let it hang. And I'm going to grab the top of the hackamore here and just slide it forward off of his ears and off of his nose. I'm going to hold on to that on my right arm while I put the halter on. And like we learned last time, we're going to slide the halter over his nose, put the long strap over his neck, thread it through the loop here, and tie it in a knot going away from his eyes. Now that his halter is on, I can take the reins off of his neck and hang my hackamore on the horn of my saddle. Now I'm ready to go and take my saddle off. Now I'm ready to take my saddle off. So first I'm going to take my hackamore from the horn and hang it on my bridle rack, wherever that might be. Now I'm going to take the latigo out of the latigo keeper right here, and I'm going to put my stirrup up on my horn so I have easier access to my latigo and my cinch. Then I'm going to undo the knot that I did earlier just by threading the latigo back through itself and pulling all of the loops out of the buckle. You can let your cinch hang down for now. But I'm going to put my latigo away by wrapping it through this loop where it's attached 2 or 3 times to make a nice loop so that when I put my saddle away, nothing is hanging. If your latigo is long enough, you can tie it in a knot at the top of the loops, the same way that you tied the latigo when you were doing your cinch. Now that my latigo is put away, I can take my stirrup down from this side, and I'm going to circle to the other side to take my cinch off of the saddle. Like on the other side, I'm going to put the stirrup up on the horn so I have easier access to the cinch. Then I'm going to pull the off billet out of its keeper and unbuckle the cinch from the off billet. Now I can take the stirrup off of my saddle and put the cinch away.
Ready.
Now that my cinch is no longer on my horse, I can take the saddle all the way off of my horse. To do that, I'm going to lift right here underneath the horn and on the back of the saddle, and I'm going to pull all the way up and away. If your saddle is heavy or you're having trouble swinging it off of your horse without hitting them, you can always take the stirrups and put them up on the horn so that they're out of the way. For this saddle, I'm just going to lift it right off of his back. And I'm going to put my saddle away, making sure that nothing is folded under when I put it down. Now all I have to put away is the pad. And that you lift off of the horse the same way by grabbing the front and back and putting your pad back wherever it goes. And that's how to take your saddle off of your horse.